talk today about facility dogs. I just want to scratch the surface a little bit. Um, as you see, we're placing a lot of facility dogs. And what does that mean? What are they? What are the special considerations? There's very little known, and that's part of the problem. There's very little known about how to incorporate a dog at work, the considerations that need to be made. How do you choose a dog that you feel could do this kind of work? uh, a lot of things, and there's just not the information out there. So we're just going to briefly talk about today and cover what is a facility dog and what considerations need to be made. And this could be really helpful for those that are thinking, maybe I want a dog at work full-time or part-time. What would that look like? How does that happen? All of that information you need to know. I spend a great deal of time in Zoom interviews with people either applying to Healing Hearts and or just wanting to find the right candidate, the right puppy that we feel could potentially be a facility dog. And then they try to navigate their own journey and path to get their puppy to that point. And so these are things that I talk about with them. This is kind of just scratching the surface a little bit, just giving you some initial information about facility dogs. The first thing though, let's differentiate what the heck is a facility dog. I've been working really hard to educate you the different types of working dogs, and as a whole, I am just incredibly happy and pleased that people are getting it right a lot now. A service dog is a dog that works for one person. They're trained in usually 2 to 3 specific tasks to help that person mitigate a disability. They are the only of these 3 dogs that are covered by the ADA. So they can go into public, they can go to a restaurant, they can travel with you. However, fun fact, if you didn't know, to get a dog on a plane, they're actually not covered by the ADA, they're covered by Department of Transportation. And so you don't have the same rights to get on a plane with a service dog as we once thought. The Department of Transportation can say no. So that's another whole fun show for another day, but so I don't want you to automatically assume you can take your dog on the plane because it's a service dog, because ADA does not cover a dog while in flight. A therapy dog is a dog that you own. It's your pet. You can train it. You can go to weekly classes. Typically, those dogs get the Canine Good Citizen certificate. It's a test really displaying and showing that this dog is well behaved, essentially. Like, this dog is well behaved, it has good manners, it has a good temperament, it has good obedience. So almost all therapy dog organizations now do require that they get their Canine Good Citizen certificate, and anybody can take that. So if it's something you're interested in as well, you could take it. I'll do a Friday show about the Canine Good Citizen test and teach you about it, and so you can learn about it. I'm also an evaluator, so I can evaluate dogs and certify them. So a therapy dog is just your pet. Then you work under an organization that has the insurance, that has, they have the connections with which locations they bring dogs into. So if they have a specific school they work with, a specific hospice they work with, a specific long-term facility care they work with, you go and work with the contracts that they have. And you abide by their rules, their regulations. That you don't work a dog longer than an hour. You typically don't work them more than once a week. You're vested under their organization, like Therapy Dogs International or Pet Partners, or 2 of them off the top of my head that are large therapy dog organizations. Then we have the facility dog, and this is really exciting because this is really just something fairly new that is happening in our society, in our culture, and this is where dogs are working at our work with us. And so you're not working under a therapy dog organization, and they are not a service dog working for one person. They're working for the location, so it's kind of like a mascot at work. And so they could function for the employees that work there. They could function for the clients that come into that location, but they're really kind of the mascot. So how in the heck do you make this happen? And here are some considerations that need to be addressed before deciding, do you want a therapy dog at your place of employment? First of which, some types of facility dogs that we've placed are, we have a dog at a funeral home. That's an incredibly special placement. The consideration with that is everybody that dog meets is in deep, deep grief, and so that's a lot for a dog to manage and mitigate. Schools are really popular to have a dog working with either one teacher in a classroom, or typically my favorite is if the school counselor wanted to be the handler. That's a great place for the dog to function and work, is in the counseling department of a school, because they can reach a lot of other kids and be there during those meetings and those times. The dentist office is, we have one working in a dentist office, which is, it's great. The dog meets the patients that come in and while they're getting their teeth cleaned. If they want to, the dog can be up on their lap. Can you take care of that, please? Sorry. Where are we at? Victims advocate offices, the courthouses or colleges, we've placed in both. So working with victims advocacy. And then just offices. We've had dogs placed at busy, stressful architecture office, lawyers, law firms, just changing that environment with one dog to help their staff. Community outreach programs are really common and popular. And counseling offices is great for a marriage counselor, a family counselor. Those are some of the easier placements because it's not as stressful. It's not meeting a bunch of people. Very, very different when you think about putting a dog, and this is what we don't think about. This is why we're talking about this. It's very different putting a dog in a school where they're being what I call swarmed by kids. A whole group of kids will right around the dog, right? So they're literally surrounded, swarmed by kids, petting, touching, reaching down, hugging a dog. That's a very different type of environment. That's going to happen every day. The energy of kids. A school placement is one of, by far, the most difficult placements I can make. It has a huge impact, but it's a very difficult placement. Versus like a counseling office where it's one person at a time, or working at hospice or a long-term care facility with one of the employees, where they're visiting with one person at a time. It's very different. So when you start talking facility dogs, the one thing I need to know is I have to get a really good idea of what's the environment really going to look like? How many different people will they be visiting with a day? And what will that look like? The funeral home, for example, while they're only visiting with one family at a time, every single family is in deep grief or shock. So it was finding that dog that was high human focused, but not very tender hearted, that they didn't feel responsible for everybody's grief. Everybody they meet every day at work is in grief, crying, upset. So that dog is faced with every day people at their worst, in a sense. Addiction facilities is another great placement for dogs. We've had dogs placed at corrections, anywhere where people have thought, I think I can make a difference at this job, at my life, at my profession, with the power of a dog. We typically can make that happen. So these are some considerations, though, that I have to really hash out with people, and they have to understand, because when you're going into something, you just don't know what you don't know, And so it's educating, and sometimes we can't make it happen because it's unrealistic in the environment or the situation, or there's people want to have more than one handler, and we talk a lot about the cons of some, like more than one person being the handler of the dog. And because of that, the dog really needs to have a strong bond with their handler that's going to be working them at the place of employment. And they need to have that person they can trust. They need to have that person that watches for their stress signals, make sure they get daily breaks, make sure their needs are being met. And when you start handing them off to 2 or 3 different handlers in a week, even going home with different people, the problem is, what I've seen is the dog kind of gets lost in the shuffle. and those things aren't being caught, and dogs get overworked. And when dogs get overworked, we start to see that manifesting in anxiety in the car, and then at work we start to see that manifesting in growling or barking at people when they weren't doing that before. Like it's just like people that get burnt out. Dogs absolutely, it happens to them too. And they're sitting there waving a flag, basically like, this is too much, this is too much, people aren't watching my stress signals, and we're not catching that. So that's a huge con for me. I much prefer, I think it's far more successful if we have pretty much one handler that takes care of that dog at least 90% of the time, lives with the dog, brings the dog to work, manages and watches the dog at work. Here's the thing though, and I have to ask people, is that realistic though with the job that you do? Because we forget they also have to work. They have their responsibilities. They either need to be answering phones, on the computer, counseling, talking, walking through the halls, having meetings, having appointments, whatever the job is. Is it realistic that they can do both? That was something that was really eye-opening for me when I implemented the first dog in the classroom in Clark County in Las Vegas. Was I didn't think that through a whole lot. Like, oh wait, I still have to teach and do open house and have parent conferences, and there's fire drills, and taking a kid out in the hall and having a private conversation with them. I still have to work. I'm still working. On top of that, can I manage a dog and make sure their needs are being met? And that was really, really eye-opening for me, and I learned a lot through that process. And those are things that I'm able to pass along to others that are wanting to do facility dog work. A consideration you have to think about is who legally owns the dog. Does the location own the dog, or does that employee, the boss, the owner, who's ever going to be the handler, do they own the dog? Who's paying for the dog? We absolutely recommend having insurance on the dog. Who's paying for the grooming and the food and the vet care? Who's doing all of that? Because what you have to think about is if the employee does own the dog, when the employee leaves, then the dog goes with them. You lose your facility dog. So there's pros and cons to both as well. The con to that is if the employee does leave, now the dog's life is kind of uprooted. Hopefully not a whole lot, because they know the other person that will be their new handler, but now they have a different home and a different handler, and their life kind of shifts and adjusts again as well. So I think we covered some of those considerations. Yep, who legally owns the dog, who pays for the dog, who's the handler for the dog, finding the best person, not only that's good with dogs, understands dog psychology. I really struggle with placing a facility dog with a handler that's never owned a dog, or hasn't, I'm going to be honest, hasn't successfully owned a dog, because this is a very, as a whole, facility dog placements are very, very difficult. And so we really look for people that have some dog experience, have well-behaved dogs themselves, and just have some of that established so that it trickles over into a more successful program at work with their new dog. Okay, some of the concerns we have seen. If this does not happen, yeah, Rachel just tuned in and said that's the really hard part. It is, Rachel, because the facility could be amazing. The job that the dog needs to do could have such a profound impact. Like, think of a funeral home dog, or a dog at an at-risk school, or one of my favorites too, and we don't share about it because it is fairly private, is with the victims, with minors that are victims that have to go up and testify, which is insane, and it's frustrating that we put kids through that, but they have to. So they're able to take the dog with them up on the stand and testify, and then all the debriefing after that, they have the dog, and moving all up into testifying, they have the dog as well. But we have to also think about, is the handler capable? Do they truly have the dog skills to manage and continue with the training? Dogs are free will animals. You have to be firm and kind. Like, those are the two most important words. You have to be firm and kind to keep the dogs training tight, to keep them performing well in public, to keep their obedience solid, to meet their needs and orders so that they're happy and fulfilled. And it's a huge It's a huge undertaking. You know, I talk to the handlers now. I'm like, do you have the ability to exercise and play and meet their needs before work? Do you have the ability to leave work and take the dog home? They can't go from not being at your place of employment to working full time. And when I say full time, I mean the whole time you are there. When a dog is on a leash, it is considered working. It does not have free will. It's being asked to maintain a level of obedience that entire time. If their sleep is being interrupted, so if they're in an office or up on a couch or, you know, at a center or a facility, if people are able to, whenever they come in and they want to visit with the dog and wake up the dog is considered working. So, you know, making sure that handler is paying attention to, you know what, we've had a lot of uninterrupted sleep today. We've been on the leash a lot. Does that location have a space where the dog can be leash free? We've had several locations they're building an exercise run outside safe for the dog. And the rules will be when the dog is in the exercise run, leave them alone. Like no asking for affection or attention, no calling them to you. Let them just be a dog. Let them truly tune out, de-stress, sniff, relax, not have anything asked of them. Because when you look at it from their point of view too, when they're constantly being called and asked to come and engage, come and engage, come and engage, that is exhausting. That is work for a dog when that's every day, day after day after day. So making sure we find that person that can meet the dog's needs prior to going to work, while you're at work, how much flexibility do you have in your position? And then after work, are you able then to make sure this dog goes home, de-stresses, is just a dog? If you have another dog, are they closely bonded? That's always fantastic. They go back to other dogs in the house and they can rough play and you know, run outside and have all of their needs met. We've got to make sure that the handler is watching for stress signals. If we're missing those and we're overworking, you can, and I've seen it happen, absolutely ruin the dog where they no longer can work there anymore. It will get past the point of now that dog no longer not only trusts you anymore, they're not going to really have an innate deep trust for humans in general anymore. And it's just not fair to continue to ask them to keep working. So we do also, yes, having a crate, Rachel brought up too. We have all of our facility dog locations have a kennel for their dog there. They're all kennel trained. They come loving their kennel. That's a part of when we decide, when we look at our dogs in training, which dogs do we feel could be a facility dog. There are a lot of things we look at. There are a lot of things we test. One of those is, do they love their kennel? We really want them to love their kennel. We want them to get something special in their kennel that they wouldn't normally get. Maybe it's a Kong with peanut butter. Maybe it's a raw bone. Maybe it's an antler. Maybe it's I can't even think. There's several things that are high value, but they just can't eat right away. You know, can they get those at work? And the other thing is too, the rule is I have to make sure that the location, the place of employment where this dog will be, when the dog is in the kennel, it's off limits. I had to have that same rule in the classroom. When the dog was in the kennel, the kids knew I had to train the kids. The dog was off limits. No talking to the dog. Not, you can't even, like, they're on time out in a good way though. Like they need a break. They're on break. And when you are on break, we're not bothering you. Just like for kids, I had to explain, when you put your headphones on or you're watching TV or you're listening to music, you get frustrated when you keep getting interrupted. So this, in that way, that's the same thing for this dog in the kennel. They cannot be interrupted. Let them be. They need to have that time where they're not interrupted. Then do they have, we talked a little bit about this, do they have chances for true breaks during the day? Can they be off leash and outside? So I love some of our schools are fully fenced in and they can go out with the kids during PE and run their little hearts out in a big field. I'm like, awesome. Like, let them sniff and run and play and be a dog. I know when I was teaching, we didn't have a fenced in place, but they moved me rooms. And I had a room that had an outside door, and I had my student, they gave me a student aid at a specific time. See, these are all the things you have to think about. when it would be a potty break and just an outside break for the dog to go out and sniff and go potty, and she'd take it on a little walk. I had parents' permission. I had it in writing that she was able to go out because it was in the front of the school, but off to the side there was rocks and trees and stuff. There wasn't grass, I don't think. I don't remember, but she was able to take the dog through this special door that I had that led to the front of the school and give the dog a break every day, a little walk. And he would get so excited, like when she would come, like he would knew before she was coming that it was a break for him. Even though he was still on leash, she was really good about not asking him to heel or sit or anything, like go sniff, and let the leash just kind of a longer leash and let him just, he got to control, he got free will, he got to go sniff what he wanted to sniff, walk where he wanted to walk. He had that time for free will, which was really important. So it wasn't like he was on the leash in a perfect heel and she had all these expectations of him. It was very much known, even so much so it was a different leash. It was his, like free leash. And if it was a longer lead, like 20 feet, so she could just sit there and let him go and have as much as possible, like this chance to truly have some free will and have a break. Sniffing is a great de-stressor for a dog. So giving them the opportunity to go out and sniff. But again, remembering, yes, I know they're on a leash, and technically when they're on a leash, they're working, but you can make it, if you don't have the option to have a fenced in spot where they can truly be free off leash, you can have them on a longer lead, and just keep in mind they need this opportunity to decide where to go, how long to sniff at this bush, and just have that free will and do what they want to do and de-stress. It's great for dogs. It's important for their mental state. Going out and sniffing, I know it seems so easy, but we forget. And the next thing, one of the biggest concerns and causes for failure with the facility dog is that, which we work really closely with our clients, and they have to start out slow. You can't take them again from 0 to 100. So it's 2 days a week for a couple hours. And do you have the option or ability for someone to pick up the dog, or can you take the dog home? There has to be lots of kennel breaks, making sure that all of these things are happening every day, de-stressing and exercising before they go into work, and after and during. They get true breaks where they're not being interrupted. They get a true nap or two where they're not being interrupted. And a lot of this applies too for service dogs that are working out in public or go to work with their handler. These are the same considerations that have to be accounted for as well when asking a dog to work. Dogs sleep a lot, but they'll also try to stay up and follow. And the more times they're up and down, they go to lay down and you're getting them up, so you have to move, and they lay down and you're getting them up to move, like over and over and over and over again. You've got to be considering, like, if they were home or they had the chance, they had the free will, they would be napping right now. Instead, we keep interrupting them, And lastly, again, the big difference with facility dogs and why they can be a very difficult placement is it's not actually that easy to find a dog that will enjoy. Many will do it to an extent, but actually enjoy engaging and meeting strangers every day. Now, if it's a place of employment where they're just going to work for the employees, so it's the same office, it's the same people every day, very different placement than when you're asking a school with 400 kids, or a facility or center where strangers come in, so you never know who's coming through the door. You don't know their energy, their intensity, anything. And so, you're kind of in the blind too, and you're asking your dog to engage, go say hi, go meet with strange people. Not very many dogs love to do that over and over and over and over again. The first thing you do want to look at is the breed. There are breeds that have been bred to be more friendly, like golden retrievers and Labrador retrievers that do have that more natural ability to be that way. And then on top of that, you got to find the right puppy. And you don't always know at 8 weeks how that's all going to play out. It's all about nice, safe socialization, not meeting too many people, not letting too many people handle, and that everything is safe and trusted and respected. So you get to the point that you can try to build this dog while respecting and honoring and listening to them. Is this a job you want? Because again, like I said, a school facility dog for me is the most complicated, difficult placement. to make. And then, they're dealing with kids all day too, which can be unpredictable and loud, and they're screaming. And just walk through a middle school in between classes when that bell rings. Walk through the hall yourself. It's overwhelming and loud. And then imagine, and kids are teenagers, randomly grab the dog, randomly say something to the dog. They're just, some of them are just goofy. So you are putting that dog in that place, and you have to really make sure whoever the handler is aware of all of that and is really careful and cognizant of how much that unpredictability is that dog feeling and is subjected to. So facility dogs, what an incredible thing. I mean, it's really exciting to be part of this culture that's really shifting and accepting these dogs at work. We've placed several in police departments as well, working with their crisis response teams for their staff, for the firefighters, for the police, for the first responders, especially after traumatic calls, to go in and debrief. There's always been that barrier, and suicide rates are really, really high. And we've already placed one, and we have a few more to go that are in the works. But I can't, and I've experienced it myself, and it's really hard to even articulate and put into words how much one dog can not only change, for me personally, my classroom, but the school and then the community as a whole. More people would come to the basketball games if the dog was going to be there. More people would come to open house if the dog was going to be there. I had better attendance rates. My at-risk kids were in school more. Their reading rates were improving at a greater rate than they were when the dog wasn't there, because they could sit there and read with the dog. They'd lay on the floor and do their schoolwork, for crying out loud. Like, they were getting in trouble less with the law on the weekends. Like, it was just truly incredible. And that was a 10-pound dog, and he hated every minute of it. I learned so much about honoring and respecting a dog. He did it because he loved me, and he did what I asked him to do. But it was because of him and realizing and understanding he didn't love this job that led me to trying to find a dog that could do it. And here I am, 15 years later. I've resigned from teaching. I've still yet to keep a dog. I got scammed by breeders 3 times trying to get a dog for my classroom, and really realizing there's this huge disconnect at the time of breeders were great at breeding but didn't know anything about puppy, their temperaments, right? And so there was this big, huge loss of, I don't know, just pick a puppy. And not on top of that, on top of not being able to give puppies any kind of voice. I know they're still just 8 weeks old, but there's a lot we can still see. But just breeders as a whole were very difficult to work with. I was literally scammed 3 times before I decided I'll have my one litter, raise them the way I want, choose my one puppy carefully, and then raise that and train that puppy to be in my classroom. That has yet to happen, because what I found was there was a huge, huge need for people. When I started documenting and recording everything and putting the puppies through curriculum and then giving them some sort of evaluation I was just doing at the time to try to give them a voice in their placement, to try to pinpoint what they needed and what they were telling us, that a lot of people needed that as well. People were looking for therapy dogs. People were looking for service dogs. People were starting to look for, and still are looking for, facility dogs. But I'm here to tell you, it's not an easy undertaking, and there's a lot to be put into it, from not only choosing the right breed, the right breeder, the right puppy, and even then, it's so important the way the puppy is trained leading up to that point. The chance of failure is higher than a service dog, not seeing eye dog, but other types of service dogs, because it's a very complex situation to ask a dog to work at that capacity, especially a school, with that kind of energy and unpredictability. And then the caveat is just as huge as getting the right dog, is finding the right handler that understands all of this. And when that happens, I'm here to tell you, it is such a beautiful thing, and it truly is healing hearts and changing lives through the power of a dog. I'm Jeanette with 4E Kennels. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next Friday.